Welcome to the Diocese Monday podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. It's very nice to meet you.
Anytime. Great to meet you too.
I think we were starting off on quite a nice conversation in the pub across the road. Now we've got all these lights.
Fantastic. Great rooms, great space.
I feel like we've been set up on a little blind date. Obviously set up by Nigel Chapman.
Let's not go too far too soon.
No.
Nigel has a way of putting us on the spot. But I'm glad he asked me to come through. Heard a lot about you guys through him. And when he mentioned it, I was like, well, let's do it. Can't wait.
No, amazing.
I was quite surprised to see that you guys were doing it in London. I thought when he had called me, I was in Joburg at the time.
Okay.
So it's nice to know that you guys are in two cities doing great things.
Yeah, it's different, I think, to a standard podcast. And I think it does harm us in a way that you're not grabbing an audience. So the UK market, we're still trying to get tapped into. And I think with Greg and I being South African, it's quite difficult, culturally, psychologically. We're still trying to get in there, but we have had quite a lot of guests from the UK. I think that's the number one route in.
Yeah.
So we're trying, and obviously our Cape Town audience is a lot bigger. I think it's about 83% of the listeners are still from South Africa, 13% UK. So it's growing. And the rest, we were in 43 countries in 2024.
Unreal.
Between that last 6%. So yeah.
It's amazing. The world of podcasting is fascinating.
Yeah.
I love them. I listen to them on a daily basis.
So what are your top 3 podcasts that you listen to?
So I listen to Joe Rogan, number one.
Of course. Are you a fan of UFC?
I am. I'm not a nut.
Okay.
I enjoy it. If there's a big fight card, I'll watch it. Okay. I'll miss every second or third one. Obviously a big Drickers fan.
Yeah.
I enjoy him. I think he's amazing. The Fighter and the Kid, which is it's more of a comedic podcast, but they do have a lot of interesting guests on.
Okay.
A little bit more fun. And then there's another one by Bill Burr. I think it's his Monday podcast, Monday Wrap Up, which I really, really enjoy.
What does he wrap up, like the sport on the weekend?
Just everything from life in general. He's a little bit of a, I suppose he's a moaner,
Okay.
Just listening to him moan his way through life.
Is he British?
He's American. He's just great. He kind of puts things into perspective for you and you go, okay, cool. Okay. Well, he's had the moan. I can just get on with my day now.
Okay, nice. Well, now you can jump onto Diocese Monday on a Thursday.
Fantastic. There we go. Got another one on the reel.
Let's get to know each other a little bit. So tell me, where are you from?
So born and raised in Joburg.
Okay.
Grew up in the northern suburbs of Highlands North, in and around that area, Norwood, etc. Really, really just sort of cut my teeth there.
What school did you go to?
I finished school at Sandringham High School.
Okay.
Made a lot of really good friends. We're still very close today, as you all have. You've got groups on WhatsApp. Even though guys are sort of worlds apart, we still pretty much keep in touch. We'll get together for a dinner maybe once every 2 years now. It used to be every year, but as the guys sort of spread over the continent, it's less and less. Sort of matriculated at Sandringham High. Was a keen sportsman. Really enjoyed the sports world. Did a lot of cricket. Did a lot of rugby. Did a lot of tennis. Okay. Played a bit of football after school for a while. Suppose you learn some of your biggest lessons in those sorts of environments: teamwork, who the captain is, who to listen to, who the slacker is, and it kind of gives you these lessons that you carry through for life. I got my first job at the age of 15. I was working at the Spur.
That's pretty good.
I was a clown.
Oh, wow. Okay.
dressed up as a clown. I was giving kids balloons and stuff like that. That lasted 2 weeks. I was saving up for a small project, but I think that was important. It was an important lesson for me.
There's a bit of an entrepreneurial mindset there at 15.
Yeah, listen, I mean, we had just started accounting in Standard 6, and I did a general ledger and like the debits and the credits, and I remember writing them down. And when I got the project, I quit the job because, I think my young girlfriend at the time saw me walking through a shopping centre dressed as a clown, and that didn't go too well. The next day. That was over. So I kind of bought what I needed to from that job, and I realized, well, from a young age, accumulation is everything, right? Sometimes you've got to put your pride in your pocket, got to do what you got to do to get the things that you want in life, and that was a lesson pretty much early on for me.
That's
and
quite philosophical for a 15-year-old to think
yeah,
that
look,
way.
you know what? We grew up in a very sort of middle class, lower middle class household, filled with love, but also not a lot of money. So we had to do what we had to do from a young age in order to get what we wanted. And I suppose from there, sort of went into, I didn't study. I think at the time, didn't really have the money or the luxury to get out there and really get into the books and things. And if I'm perfectly honest, I was never really the academic type who could sit and do a 3 or 4 year degree. I then went back and tried to study at the age of 22. I did law for 2 years or so.
Okay.
But then that itch again to make money and not sit around, I never really had the talent to study and work at the same time.
Was that in Joburg as well?
That was in Joburg. I went to Midrand campus. I did a couple of years there. I left the books behind and I joined the diamond industry.
Okay.
A family friend of ours said, look, I can see you're ambitious. You've got something about you. Why don't you come and work for me in diamonds?
That's interesting.
And the world of diamonds sounds glamorous, right? Yeah. You think these beautiful, shiny, high-value item things, you're really going to have success here. But I think once again, what it was very much a cold calling experience. So you'd go and visit people you'd never met before and try and sell them diamonds.
Where are the diamonds coming from?
So all over the place, right?
African.
So the African diamonds, yeah. So they'd be polished in the center that I worked at, and then they would be certified. So they'd get their grading, and then it would go to a sort of market in Antwerp, believe it or not. And the guys would have to fly to Antwerp, and then they'd bid on stones.
Okay.
And then they bring them back to South Africa. So not the most sort of green industry these days. The carbon footprint was quite high with regards to moving that stuff around. And I think more lessons there, right? I learned a lot more lessons, sort of like come out of your shell. If you really want to make a success of this thing, you're going to have to do things you don't really like to, or you're not natural at. And I suppose all this time, what it was showing me was that I needed to be independent. You know, I didn't like the suit and the tie. I didn't like sitting behind a desk. I didn't like listening to people telling me how I needed to live my life and what I needed to do the next day. Yeah. So I really had this sort of burning desire to start something for myself and really sort of get into the world of business. I should have stayed in the diamond job. Think about it now. I should have just stayed where I was.
I wanted to say my dad, when I tell him that we're trying to go into apparel, he says, no, you're not. Please don't. You'll hate every minute of it. And he did it for 40 years. So that's quite funny that you say that.
It's unbelievable. I got a mate, Grant, he owns Craft & Co. It's a restaurant in Parktown, yeah. And he made a video today on Instagram, and he just said, to all those businessmen that think restaurants are a bad investment, they are. They're not the most financially stable businesses, but at the same time, you can't put a price on the sort of the give back it gives you in terms of emotional connection and the people that you make happy, right? So sometimes it's not always about money, but it's about the joy that you take from your experience at work, right?
And I can tell he's one of those restaurant owners. All good restaurants, the owners are there every night.
He's never not there.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about him. He's there day and night. He loves what he does. And for him, it's not a financial decision. It's more an emotional one. And I take my hat off.
Yeah, absolutely. So how did you find yourself in the retail space? I know you are now the CEO of Infinite Group.
Yeah.
And I mean, I see Scotch and Soda all over the place. So how does that, it's obviously not its own company. I assume Infinite Group is.
Yeah, so we have this quasi group that we call the Infinite Group. It all stems back to our very first store. So going back even a little bit before that, my business partner and I, one of my good friends, Vic, we lived in London in 2002. And sort of our pastime after work, we were working as barmen and we were making a few pounds and we needed to go out and spend it. And our passion, our real joy in life was on the Saturday that we got off, we would go shopping on the high streets.
How old were you now, 2002?
21.
Did you also have an easier access to the UK? Do you have UK heritage or?
No, not at all. Back in the day, you'd get a 2-year working visa.
Okay.
And I got a 2-year working visa, which was always an uphill battle because you needed some form of finances to show that you could actually afford to make the trip and live. But we got through that and we got the 2-year visa. Our Saturdays were spent scrolling the streets. We'd be walking up and down, looking at brands, looking at opportunities. but never did we ever think that what we were doing on that Saturday would result in a sort of long-term career.
Yeah.
The joy for shopping, the joy for finding things to look good, the experience that we got in these stores in the UK at the time was nothing that we'd ever experienced in South Africa.
And that was in 2002.
That was in 2002. So I think that we parked that, it sort of sat in the back of our heads. We came back to South Africa. I'd then gone into the diamonds. Vic had gone into working for a company called Replay.
Okay.
And he had retail
The clothing
experience,
brand.
the clothing brand.
Yeah.
And, you know, when I was on my breaks, whenever I was visiting the centers and visiting the jewelers to try and get diamonds to them, I would then visit Victor in the shopping centers. We'd sit down and we'd have a lunch. We go, when are we going to do something for ourselves? You know, it's time.
Yeah.
It's time.
Still
You need
working
to
for the
leave
man,
here.
yeah.
I need to leave what I'm doing. There's just no joy. I'd come in my sort of suit and tie, and he would be in his jeans and T-shirt, and I'd be like, I need to be like this. I need to leave what I'm doing. And we came up with a business called Craft and Sewn. And what the whole vision of that business was to create men's jewelry and leatherware, so wallets, accessories for men, and then jewelry. So whether it's bangles or rings or necklaces, etc., we saw a gap in the market for that. Okay. Now, through my jewelry connection, we would manufacture some of the jewelry through some of the guys that I'd known that we were doing diamonds with. And we put out a product. I think we got into like 3 or 4 stores before it failed dismally.
Oh, okay.
Right?
So how did that fail?
I think it's just too, I suppose, just too unique. You know, we believed in it so much that perhaps it was too soon.
And how did you handle financing and losing was it your own money or?
It was our own money.
Okay.
I think we had made some money over the time that we had. But once again, that morphed into something pretty quickly where we started importing different accessories for iPhones and laptops, etc. We kind of got them into Incredible Connection and the R stores. And that was quite a nice business for guys our age. You know, we didn't need a lot at the time to live, and the product was doing pretty well. But it was amazing how one business morphed into another.
It was the failure of one thing.
The failure of one thing that we had to let go of, but then went into something which involved importation. And it wasn't necessarily about the product, it was about the process. So we learned how to import products. And then that sort of led to an opportunity where there was an open store in an area called Birdhaven near the Wanderers.
Okay.
It was an off-the-street location, never seen before in South Africa. It's not Cape Town. We're talking about Joburg, right?
Yeah.
So there was a small restaurant called Dolce Con Gusto, and there was an open space next to them where we thought we would open up our first clothing fashion store. It was simply called 62. It was the number of the store. We decided to keep the name, call it 62. We booked flights we managed to raise some investment from a friend of ours, Mark Galvin, and he came into that project with us. We booked flights to the UK. We took 2 or 3 empty suitcases, and we went shopping, and we filled the bags up with things from
Samples.
Topshop, Zara.
Yeah.
Anything you couldn't get in South Africa at the time is what we put in those bags.
So it's quite scary to think that at one point Zara, H&M, they all didn't exist in South Africa.
They didn't exist, and that's where our opportunity lay, right?
Yeah.
So if they had existed, it might have been a much harder thing for us because we hadn't sort of developed the relationships with the bigger brands at that stage. And I think when that product got back, we put it on the shelves, and it did pretty well.
But are you now selling Zara items in your number 62?
Correct. Zara, Topshop, and then sort of 1 or 2 very small brands that were international brands, but were almost nothing burgers. They were like really, really small, and they were all too happy but to supply us.
Yeah.
So we had started forging relationships. We knew how to import now, and we just started speaking to the right brands over a long period of time. Okay. We've got a great store in Birdhaven. It's picking up. People are coming to visit. We're getting a reputation.
How are you marketing this store in 2003?
All through 2006.
6, okay.
Yeah. So this is all through word of mouth.
Because it's pre-social media.
Pre-social media, no marketing budget whatsoever. Yeah. I still believe until this day that word of mouth is the strongest. Building your community.
Yeah.
You know, if you get it on the right people early on, call them sneezers. Someone sneezes and everyone else gets a cold. We believe that was the best route to market. And so we went. We started to forge relationships with bigger brands. We said, we've got a great store in Birdhaven. You have to come see it if you really don't believe us. And for whatever reason, we managed to break through. It didn't take 2, 3, or 4 weeks. It didn't take a month. It took a space of 2 years to really start to catch the big fish.
Yeah.
So along with a brand called Fabiani, we started working with a brand called G-Star. We were the second guys in South Africa to work with G-Star.
Okay.
And we had really, really good success with it. And I think off the back of that, G-Star was the hottest brand in that space in the world at the time.
So G-Star wasn't in South, you brought it to South Africa?
No. It was in South Africa.
Okay.
They were very cagey because they were doing decent business in South Africa with a brand called Fabiani.
Yeah, which I know, yeah.
Ari Fabian, he was the guy who had that
My father
business.
worked for a little bit for Fabiani.
Yeah. And we convinced them. We said, look, we're completely different. We're more streetwear. They're a little bit more smart casual. We feel that the brand's very well suited to our environment. And at this stage, we'd opened up our second store and then our third store. The next one was in Melrose Arch and the other one was in Morningside. We got G-Star product into the business, and it sort of revolutionized who we were, how we did business, and it gave us amazing credibility with anyone else we dealt with.
Yeah.
So roll on 2010 World Cup. The store in Melrose Arch, I see waves and waves of British supporters coming through to the fan park.
Yeah.
And they all happen to be wearing Superdry.
Okay.
I was like, what? We've had connections with Superdry before. In fact,
Yes.
we kind of discarded them at the time because when we'd seen them in 2007, they were a really small outfit. We saw them at a trade show. We knew who to deal with at the time. His name was Theo. And we just thought, why is everyone wearing Superdry? Is there something that we might have missed here? So we went back to the drawing board.
So you purely picked that up by just watching the fans coming to the...
It's the only that is one of my biggest qualities. I look and I absorb. I'm downloading all the time. So
Okay.
I see things and I take them on board and I'm like, I wonder what that is.
Yeah.
I need to check up on that later.
No, it's interesting because I would go on a holiday. We would come to the UK. It's a family holiday. My dad would buy Superdry at this time. I can't remember what year it was, but I would assume after 2010. And there was the Superdry drive. There was a G-Star drive with jeans, 100%. We would come every year. He would buy clothes from the UK because it just was better quality, value.
Yeah. So for us, we needed to be very selective because we've got a 45% import duty in South Africa. We have to really be it has to be curated. It has to be something that we know would become premium, because all of a sudden anything that should cost $4.99 is now $8.99, just by virtue of that import duty. So we had to be able to take a brand that is sort of middle market and make it entry-level luxury, just because of the pricing and the deficit of all of those things I've discussed. We opened up our first store in 2011. It was a real battle to get the brand. I think we almost lost it a couple of times.
Wait, first store? You've had
The first Superdry store.
first Superdry. So you bring Superdry to South Africa?
We've now got the franchise agreement.
Right.
We've got the license to do it.
Yeah.
We opened up the first store in Sandton. 2011 was the 11th of the 11th, 2011. I remember it because it was a significant date for us. And I suppose that's where the real first taste of our success started. We owned something that no one else could touch. We knew the guys pretty well, and we just really knew that this had the legs to go a long way for us.
How did you know that it would capture the South African market?
I think at the time, just looking around, there was very little like Superdry. And I had also been privy to seeing some of their success overseas, and then again seeing all of those British fans wearing Superdry product. And I knew it would translate. I don't know what the reasons were. It's just maybe a feeling or intuition. But I knew that kids would relate to it, and dads at a barbecue or a braai would relate to it too.
I can picture it. Yeah.
And once you've got that right, when you can sell to fathers and sons, then you've kind of captured the market. And we knew we were heading in that direction. And I think by the end of the Superdry process in about 2018, 17, we sold the business off to a company called Bounty Brands.
Yeah.
And we had 10 or 12 stores at the time, between 10 and 12 stores at the time. We'd done a great job with it. We'd done everything we felt that we needed to achieve. We're not sentimental about these things. We know they're businesses.
Ready to move on.
We don't fall in love with them. We love them while we're doing it, but we just don't get attached. And I think, when it's the right time, that's the time to let it go.
Did you take any position in Bounty Brands?
So I worked with Bounty for, I think it was a year earn-out period, where I, again, sort of felt going back to working for someone. I never really worked for them, but there was a hierarchy there where there were people who were sort of above me and felt they knew better than me when it came to making decisions. And, if I felt it was wrong, I would advise them differently. But at the same time, it's their business. They paid handsomely for it. So I'll fall into line. It's a temporary post. And ultimately, I think, that came to an end. But alongside that, we launched Scotch and Soda.
Right.
That was in 2013 or 14.
But now Scotch and Soda, is it, from what I read, it's Amsterdam. It's a Dutch company.
It's a Dutch company.
Okay. So how did that...
So again, I suppose by virtue of what we were doing on an everyday basis.
But you were living in South Africa.
We're living in South Africa. But
you launched a Dutch?
No. We launched Scotch and Soda in South Africa.
Right. Okay.
Right. The same mechanism we used for Superdry, a franchise agreement. We wanted to expand. We wanted to de-risk from Superdry. We wanted to keep adding brands to our stable. And so we added Scotch and Soda, opened the first store in 2014. It had been in South Africa for a while before that. The company that was doing it wasn't really doing much with it, quite selfish in their approach to doing business. We believed we could do more, and we let the guys know. We could definitely do 5, 6, 7, 8 stores, and we could do some wholesale with your business, and the guys were open to it. And I think just by the reputation we had garnered at that stage, it became easier for us to have these discussions. And that's still ours today in South Africa. We still got a good business. The brand performs really nicely. Okay. We've just taken on the UK license, so I've got a store on Carnaby Street with Vic.
Yes.
We own the Carnaby Street store now, and we've taken on the brand for the UK. So
did that initiate your move over here?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
No. I think my move to the UK came off the back of an opportunity my wife got in the UK. And I think, for many years, selfishly, I was all about my own business. And I never really never took notice of her career, but I think that, there was opportunities where she wanted to fly and she had to allow me to do so. And she compromised a bit in order for that to happen. And I felt that at that stage of things, I really wanted to give her opportunity to see what the world was like, to see what it was like to work in London. And she holds a great position.
Oh, that's amazing.
She's in fintech. She's in sort of
what a place to be for fintech.
Blockchain type stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
She does big things. I wish I could tell you more about it because it's above my pay grade.
It would go over my head as well.
Yeah, so she's fantastic. She's great. I think she's the reason that sort of drives me. But I think in between the Scotch and Soda and the Superdry thing, there was an interesting opportunity that came. We were talking about it earlier, right? So you're meeting interesting people on the podcast, and one thing leads to another, and you never know where you're heading. So we would do a lot of traveling, and what we noticed was, in order to enhance the experience of retail, retail's not just about taking a space, opening the doors, filling it with stock and staff. In order to be competitive these days, you have to do something that's pretty special. You have to do stuff that hasn't been seen before. And at the time it was, how curated is your music playlist? You have to really sort of hit the heart of your market. You have to keep the energy in your store up at all times. You have to be relevant in your playlist. Fragrance through the air vents. You have to have a signature scent, because when someone has that memory recall, they know that's the smell of Scotch and Soda.
Okay.
So
that's interesting. Yeah, I was going to ask what differentiates, the brands that are successful.
It's the little things. It's
almost not the clothing.
Sometimes it's not the clothing. It's about the experience. It's about the attention to detail. And yeah, it is about the brand, and it is about the reputation, and it is sometimes about that sort of social credibility. When someone else is wearing it, you go, wow, that's nice. I need to go give that place a visit. So what stemmed from Scotch and Soda was a lot of international travel again. We started seeing people doing coffee shops in clothing stores.
Well, we can go on to Naked Coffee? Because that's also
Sure. So we can morph into
because
that.
I'm interested how you had an entrepreneurship mindset from youth, but then you shifted into fashion and retail, just from the love of it and walking through the UK. So how did you shift into coffee as well? Was it just tied to the fashion, or did you have a passion for it?
So listen, I think the most important thing for us, and I still say this to you today, is like, what makes me happy when I get up in the morning, right? Is knowing that I've got a good outfit to wear, and that I'm greeted with a great cup of coffee. And for me, that makes me happy. There is no better way to start your day. And if I can get those two things right, then the rest is going to go smoothly. And so we started to see these little things in order to enhance the retail experience. People started to add a little bit more coffee in store. And there was a little coffee window on us in the Scotch and Soda store on PC Hoofstraat that was doing this exact thing. So
in Amsterdam, coffee's
in
quite
Amsterdam.
big. Yeah.
And Vic and I said, well, why don't we try and do this in our Infinite 60 store, which was was 62, became Infinite 60, and that's where the Infinite Group came from.
Okay.
It's a multi-branded store. It's got 5 or 6 different brands. That was a test bed to see if we could take a brand and then put it in a mono-branded environment.
Yeah.
If it was strong enough, it would go into its own environment. If it was not good enough, it would go and sell and we'd get rid of it. But we had a coffee shop. We called it Naked. It was really,
Why?
really small. So everyone wants to know why, right? So
I can imagine it's because you're into fashion. And
well, you've
it's
heard of the
other
red
side of
light
the pot.
district in Amsterdam, right?
Yes, I've walked through it.
It's got nothing to do with that. So, so there's so the way you pour your coffee through the portafilter, right, is usually it's got a spout, and what we would do is we'd bore a hole in that, and that would be called pouring your coffee naked.
Okay.
And we thought that would be a great name. We'd walk through London just throwing out names for this coffee business, and anything you can think of, we were saying. Eventually, it boiled down to Naked because of the process of how we pour our coffee, and
because I have a similar question on the coffee, because there's so many coffee houses and so many coffee shops. Again, what makes a successful coffee shop? I mean, there's hardly any differentiation between actually the coffee being good, I guess. But you see a Gales here in London on every corner. What makes Gales different to your local coffee shop that hasn't been able to expand? Like, what is the difference?
The difference is in the mindset of the owner. Coffee shops can be one. A coffee shop is one. Coffee shops is more than one. And then a coffee business is an empire. I think you've got to pick where you want to play. And I think from our bigger business sort of mindset, we always knew we'd be bigger than a coffee shop. And in order to do that, Vic is the master of attention to detail. He really, everything at Naked is curated, right down to the cutlery, to the plates you eat on, to the service, to the way we pour our coffee, the consistency, the temperature of the coffee coming out, the consistency of the roast of the bean. Yeah. He's got one of the most unbelievable palates. If something isn't right, he's able to pick it up immediately. So,
but do you manage to keep that quality over so many stores? How do you?
It's tough. I think I'm always of the belief system is if you're at 90%, you're good, right? I think the customer, certain 95% of the customers don't realize that 10% sway in consistency. I think a lot of the time, that's the measurement for me, right? If it all falls apart, you will see it. And I think, once again, it's the world of brand. We've grew up in a world of brands. We've nurtured these things. We know how to grow them. We know how to market them. We know how to make them look glamorous. And I think a lot of the time it's in the packaging. It's in the way you eat with your eyes. Everything is a sort of an experience with your eyes before you even get to the prize. So I think everything at Naked, again, is the beautiful cup, the beautiful handle of the cup. We pay more for our cups than I think anyone in South Africa does, purely because we want you to have that experience. And it needs to feel like it's more expensive than anyone else out there, although we're pretty much the same price as everyone else. So it does come down to that branding
Finer
opportunity and just really making you want to be there and tell your friends about it.
Yeah, I like that. Because I come to the brand part. So we have started this podcast, and this is like a self-pitch, elevator pitch. And I want to now turn it into a brand. Diet Starts Monday. We've got a lot of good reception in the name alone. You know, people relate to it, that you have a big weekend, you get to Sunday, the Diet Starts Monday. And the mantra behind Diet Starts Monday is to take that challenge that's sitting at the back of your head and bring it to the forefront and go after it. And we got that it took 3 years to start the podcast. And every time I went to bed, I thought about starting a podcast. And eventually, 3 years later, I got it started. So it's pushing people to go after that challenge, whatever it might be, social, physical, mental, whatever that challenge is, to put it in front of them and go after it. That's the mantra, and that's the community that I'm trying to build, alongside having people feel safe to reach out to our community, whether it's causes like mental health or period poverty that we've worked with. So working with others, looking after your neighbor and things like that. So I want to build this brand, Diet Starts Monday, and we've recently launched a Shopify website where you can buy some of our clothes, but it's very,
Fantastic.
it's not, it's not retail to the fact that we're just launching these clothes. People will buy it just because they're a fan of the podcast, but I want to turn it into a brand, and I'm finding it quite difficult to know how to do that at all.
Yeah, it's a tough one, because I think when it's not your core business, right? Your core business is podcasting. And I think that in order to make it a brand on its own, it needs its own focus, it needs its own energy, and it needs its own driver. And more than that, I mean, we could get into it in much more detail, but I think it's almost, it needs to be a business on its own, with its own fresh approach to how you guys market it. And then again, I suppose every brand that we've ever started, every business that we've ever gotten involved in, is all built on starting it from a community base, and building it outwards.
So how do you communicate with your customer? Is it, because obviously we're in the digital age, and one of the questions I had was flagship stores are still quite big here in London, especially in South Africa, but how's that momentum changing to e-commerce and communicating with customers being so available on social media now?
So yeah, that's always the tough thing, because you're always at the mercy of somebody else's bigger budget. You know, they're getting to their wallet much faster than you can. But I think where we specialize and have always specialized is making sure, and especially in the UK, what do we bring to this market that hasn't been seen before, or has been seen and perhaps fallen away? I would say customer service. For me, that is the only thing that we've got over and above anyone else here. They've seen it all. They've seen every brand on the planet. They've got billionaires through to millionaires to light millionaires. You know, everyone can afford something. They've had so much more exposure to so much for much longer time. But every now and again, when you offer a really amazing service, like a personal phone call to say that you've got a new drop, a new drop in, and you think that this particular customer would like it, come down to the store and
That's
have
pretty
a personal
personalized.
shopping, have a personal shopping experience. When was the last time someone did that for you?
Never. I mean, I go into H&M now and you scan yourself out. You pick up the item
So
and scan it.
it's become such a fast-paced world.
Yeah.
A lot of the nuances are lost in that process. You're trying to get rid of people rather than trying to retain them. We try and retain as much as we can. It's always a warm greeting at the door. It's always a goodbye on your way out. Sometimes we miss it, but I'd like to say sort of 90% of the time.
I'm definitely going to be popping into the store.
So 90% of the time we get it right.
Yeah.
So that's from a retail experience. I think from a sort of a Shopify and marketing perspective, the world of influencer is sort of it's the thing right now.
Yeah.
I think a lot of stuff gets lost in Meta, Facebook, all paid for socials. You've got to have it. You've got to have an element of it. But again, I think it really does come down to giving a customer an experience. When they get the product, it needs to be better than they ever imagined. When they open the box, the product needs to be more of a quality that they never expected for the price point that we're going to pay. So I've recently launched a brand called Jacket.
Okay. I wanted to ask about that. Yeah. But it's Jack 1T.
Yeah, that's how it's spelt, but it's actually called Jacket.
Yeah. Okay.
We specialize in outerwear.
Yeah, in the UK.
It's actually European. So our biggest markets for Jacket are Germany, Switzerland, Austria, Poland, bit of Finland. There's a few of them.
But you see, you've launched this brand and you have such a wide network already. So how do you get to that point?
So
it's just all your previous experience.
Well, so that's not just from a D2C or an e-com perspective, right? We've got wholesale partners, got partners the likes of Zalando, who are the biggest retailer in Europe. They've got 55 to 58 million active users monthly.
Oh wow,
which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
If you just think of the pure scale of that, it's massive. And I think that from a South African perspective, now dealing with business in Europe and the UK and the USA, when you think of the scalability of developed economies, it's a mind-blowing differential between Southern Hemisphere, where I was sort of cut my teeth, now playing in the Northern Hemisphere with a brand like Jacket. It's unbelievable to see.
Yeah.
You know, you when someone says to you, sort of pick a number and dream it. You know, I think probably dreaming too small, because you can go that much further. It's endless, really.
Yeah, that's interesting. The expansion into Europe, but just so in terms of making the clothing, manufacturing the clothing, are you doing that in Europe and UK?
So we manufacture in China.
Okay.
China is the down capital of the world. They know how to. China. The perception of China is it's cheap, common, and nasty. The actual perception of China should be, you get anything that you pay for. If you want to pay for something and you pay good money, you can get the best in the world. If you give them $1 and you say, that's my budget, they'll make you something for $1. It's not going to be very good.
Yeah. So have you built those connections in China over time?
So we built the connections over the last 3.5 years. I spend about a month a year in China in the factories. We spend time at dinners. We spend time in the factories. We spend time on development. And it's just great because it's a process that I've had to learn pretty quickly and later on in life. I've never been able to produce. It's never been part of my skill set. I've got a great COO who's also a business partner in Jacket. He's got 20 odd years. He's done Tommy Hilfiger. He's done every brand out there he's been involved in. So he really does have a real firm knowledge of the way that world works, and it's really different. It's a different world out there.
So what is the product, a Jacket?
So we specialize in down-filled outerwear.
Okay.
Which is quite specific and quite technical.
Okay.
Because down is a feathered product.
Right.
So then you've also got to go through all the sustainability around down, so RDS certifications, and it's endless. We spoke about a bit of the red tape before this.
Yeah.
You know, starting a brand is not just about printing something, putting it on a T-shirt, wrapping it up, getting it on a website and delivering it to a customer.
Sort of what we've done.
It's a 10-month process from design, putting it down on paper, sort of sampling process, all the way through to production, then on the water, then onto the shelves, and then onto sell, and then you get your money back. So it's a very, very technical, other than sort of tailoring, so suited product.
Yeah.
It's a very, very technical product to get right.
Exciting.
Yeah.
So I wanted to dive into you as a person and the mindset behind running all these companies and being a CEO. Take me through, have you heard of the podcast Steve Bartlett,
Yes.
Diary of a CEO? So take me through your diary of a CEO. Like, what would your day look like? How would you communicate with your staff? Morning routine, I know you put on a nice dress and have a nice coffee to start, but take me through, a normal day.
So the first thing I do, it depends. It depends on the mind space that I'm in. I could be up anywhere from 3 a.m. worrying about how we're going to make it through.
Yeah.
Right, all the way through to, we're actually in a good space, so I can sleep until 6.
Yeah.
But the first thing I do when I get up, I check on the results from the day before. We've got someone who works on data in our business, so when I wake up, we always have a message.
How many sales?
Consolidated sales. What's going on, what's going wrong, what's going right in the business. I generally get on a call with production on Tuesdays. We have a sort of almost a 3/4 day full of dealing with factories, understanding where our product is, where we are in the process, what we got coming through and when. Are we on track? On Monday is very general. I touch base with marketing. I touch base with everything general. So I give everyone their sort of 15, 20 minutes to speak about what it is that they're working on in a general meeting. So I can get all of that information in. And anyone who needs support, I can give them time afterwards. And then sort of Wednesdays, what I enjoy doing is that's my day where I take off, and I not really take off, but like I said, I like to download information. So I'll walk the streets, I'll look at my competitors, I'll look at what the others are doing, I'll look at what people are wearing, I'll take it all in, and it's an important part of our process because it's happening right now.
Yeah.
So with that, we go away. On Thursday, I'll sit down with the design team. We'll discuss what it is that I've seen. We'll put all of our ideas on paper, and we'll start to focus on different growth areas in the business. So categories we haven't done, categories we can expand on. And then sort of Friday, I like to work on the internal finances. So I like to look and see how we're tracking. I also like to see how we can improve our margins from factory. So look at quantities versus prices, how we can shave a few percentage points off and what that means for the future pricing of the business.
Has AI affected that at all?
In terms of?
The factory and sort of cutting costs and having automated systems?
Yeah, so what we have found and what we've started using this season is more 3D modeling.
Okay.
So in the past, people would have to really sort of go out of their way to produce a sample, the first sample. First sample's always dog shit. So excuse my language, right?
No, it's fine.
Comes back, it doesn't look like the jacket that you wanted, right? Yeah. And you're feeling pretty disheartened now because your vision and their production has not sort of met, hasn't met. So what we do is we sort of do a 3D version now. We use I forget the name of this this program, but anyway, the designer's got it, and he'll knock this thing up, and you're able to rotate this thing any way you want. We'll put our branding pack on it, and then we'll go through. They'll accept it on their side, and from that, they've got tech packs along with a 3D sort of molding of the product, and that way we sort of, instead of getting 3 or 4 samples sent, we're kind of getting something almost perfect the first time round.
Yeah. Okay.
And that streamlines the process because if you think about
going back and
doing
forth,
it 3 times and then putting it on an aeroplane 3 times to get to us, it saves about a month in the process. So it is starting to help, and it's actually having a much bigger impact, in the industry.
Okay. And then in terms of going back to your sort of day, how do you take yourself out? So what do you do sort of as a hobby or for fun weekends? How do you pull yourself away from keeping an eye on the retail 24/7?
It's quite a tough one because I'm quite obsessive. And I go through really good patches where I'm able to go out and do exercise 5-6 days a week. And then sort of a rush or a wave of pressure comes on and you just drop everything that you're doing and you go back to focus and steady the ship. I used to be, or probably still am, quite a control freak with regards to outcomes. I like to know everything that's happening, right down to the customer complaint, all the way up to the most important stuff in the business.
Yeah.
I kind of still, because it's quite a digital business, because everything's done sort of away from home, we don't own stores, everything's sort of e-com based type experiences. Yeah. It's a change for me. So I really need to, by understanding the complaints, by understanding the compliments, I get to understand the customer as I would on a retail floor.
Yeah.
It's the only way they speak to you.
That's how you're learning.
That's how you learn.
That's how you're taking in your information. Okay, that's interesting. And I obviously see that you're a Springbok fan. I was going through your Instagram, and that's
big Springbok fan.
I wanted to ask you a few questions on that, not to divert too much, but because I saw on your Instagram there was quite a few posts on the Bokke. I wanted to ask, like, just to get your personal opinion on why you think South Africa has become so, like, how we've been able to get the 2 World Cup championships over the last 8 years. What is it about the Springboks that have really changed? Like, what is actually pushing the passion behind the Boks that has been different to the past? Trying to get that question together.
I think the first thing that comes to mind would probably be good leadership under Rassie. I think he's got a vision. I think everyone below him has bought into it. I think they believe and they trust in him. As any great leader, if great leaders have that, they're able to sort of part oceans. I think for the first time we've had maturity through the years. So someone like Dwayne Vermeulen, right, who's now in the coaching box, who was sort of in the last World Cup, and he was pretty pivotal. I think he's a great leader, and I think he's had younger leaders around him, and they've all learnt great habits from great people. I think for the first time we've had that. I also think diversity. I think if you look at the box squad and you just look at the types and the styles of players, we're playing to their strength, and there's a lot of trust in that team.
Yeah, I think diversity hits because, when last did we speak about the quota system? That was such a hot topic 10 years ago, and was all anyone could speak about. I haven't heard those words in the last 8 years.
Absolutely, and I think Sia himself has been a great captain too. I think he's unified the country. He's created. I remember the Springbok apparel about maybe 10 years ago, 8 years ago. You couldn't sell. You couldn't
yes,
sell.
People were throwing it in the fire. Do you remember?
You couldn't buy. No one wanted to buy a cap. No one wanted to buy a T-shirt. No one wanted to buy a jersey. Until the World Cup came, that was sort of that was the only time that thing sort of moved off shelves. Now you've got Black Fridays. People are buying their apparel. It's almost like it's its own fashion brand.
Yeah.
Right.
So what builds that rapport with the support? Because it's so true. And I mentioned it the other day when England were in the Euro final. You could see nothing in the streets as if they were in the Euro final. They couldn't wear the jersey to the offices because they're so club orientated. They'll start fighting.
Sure.
So, and I said, if we were in South Africa and we were in the final of a major tournament, these streets would be green.
Absolutely.
How can England football not have that same? So how have we built that rapport with our fans in the rugby? It's a fascinating thing to see.
Look, I think first and foremost, when you're on top of the world, right, and you've got 2 World Cups it's
easy,
on the trot in the trophy cabinet, it's not that difficult. But I think to get there, to get that first trophy, to get everyone to buy into the vision, to get behind and know you're not going to get heartbroken in the semi-final. You haven't wasted your money on this product. It actually has some form of social equity. I'm buying this because I'm a winner, and I'm perceived to be a winner, and I support a winning team. It's the same as any great football club. You're buying that as an association. It's a status symbol to a certain degree, and you're a winner. Yeah. Some guys, unfortunately, in this country are born into football clubs, and some of those football clubs never win a thing, so they're sort of doomed for life.
Like Tottenham,
yeah.
No, that's true. It's just amazing to try and figure out what was going through Russie's head sort of 8 years ago. How did he put this plan together?
Yeah.
What made him believe that it would work? It's quite an incredible thing to try and picture. These group of lads, he captained Sia Kolisi, and he spoke about it, how Eben had his back at the time when I think there was, a bit of diversity or a bit of adverse media or whatever it is when he was picked.
Sure.
He had the support from the players, and somehow they just built this.
Look, as you mentioned it earlier, was about the sort of the quota system coming in at some stage and sort of disrupting things and making it difficult to do your job. And I think if you look at the Springbok squad now, everyone who plays the game, anyone in the squad, even in the 30-man squad or 36-man squad, is deserving of their place.
Yeah.
Right?
You wouldn't replace anyone. Yeah.
And what Rassi's great is giving everyone a chance. So everyone feels as important as the next guy. Do you know how difficult that is to do? Because you want to revert to your star player every time for consistency. So you take Mani Lebok out at 10, you put Andre Pollard, or you put Sasha in. I mean, we're just creating depth and we're creating legacy here. And, I wouldn't be surprised, it wouldn't be that far-fetched to say, I think the third World Cup
is possible.
Is much better odds than we would like to think.
Yeah. And I think one of the hardest challenges, like you say, in terms of dealing with players, imagine telling Malcolm Marx you got to come off the bench every game.
Yeah.
Like that is...
The best prop who possibly could have ever lived is sitting on the bench and trying to manage that ego, manage that guy. And he buys into it. He understands the vision. He understands the purpose. That's great leadership. And there's trust there. So, caps off to Rassi.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to have that conversation because it still interests me to this day. And obviously it's a hot topic back home. Did we win the sevens? We won the sevens on Saturday. I saw Sia in the crowd. Our rugby is just...
Yeah, but then the same thing is like you look at the rest of our sport in South Africa. We've got 1 or 2 good golfers. Our tennis is nowhere. Our soccer is dead average. Yeah. We had a moment last year. I think we had a moment where we kind of made it to the semi-final of
the AFCON.
Or the final of AFCON.
Yeah.
That was promising. That really... But we've got to kick on from there, right?
Yeah.
I think provided we just continue to nurture grassroots and it has become a religion in South Africa, and there's a lot of young kids who want to be seer, who want to be urban. These guys impact kids, and that's the beauty about what they're doing, is
Absolutely.
the lasting positivity.
And this is a good segue, obviously, our love for South Africa. I wanted to ask, you've obviously made the move to the UK, and a lot of our listeners and a lot of our friends struggle with that move, or struggle to understand how to do it and the process of doing it. And we spoke about it earlier, missing home. So how do you deal with living in the UK now, having moved here about 4 years ago? Do you see yourself going back to South Africa? How are you feeling about the UK? I know you did it for your wife, and she's obviously got a career journey to move on now.
I think this is the toughest question of the
evening.
whole podcast, always mixed emotions, because I always look at things in percentages. So if I'm 44 now, I moved here when I'm 40. I've lived here for 10% of my life. That's excluding some of the time I did earlier, right? So 10% is a pretty big number. Have I gelled? Have I connected with this place the way that I should? Probably not. I'm quite hard-headed. I'm very South African at heart and at nature. I do miss home, but I think my tenacity and my willingness to keep driving, my desire to grow this business on and upwards and really take on the rest of the world with it, will keep me here for a while to come. Do I miss those sunny summers? Absolutely, because summer's never guaranteed here.
Yeah.
Could be 2 or 3 weeks of
I think we only had a couple of good days this year.
A couple of days of summer is a tough ask.
The sunlight late is nice. It's a nice
cool.
touch.
That gives you that's something to work with.
Yeah.
But I think I got back from South Africa about a month ago, and I had a really, really great time. The weather was good. It was great to see family. Those are the people you miss the most.
Yeah.
Your friends, obviously. But I suppose I'm here for my purpose, and I need to see this thing through, and I will see it through. And I suppose once I've achieved what I wanted to achieve here, I can make a decision thereafter.
Yeah, I think your passion for your business helps a lot, because I think it's the guys that are working, in your mundane 9 to 5 in the UK. You're going to work dark, you're leaving work dark. And that's why I thank this podcast quite a lot for my life, because I'm a 9 to 5. I work in a finance business that's not the love of my life. But I've managed to find some passion for something else that keeps me busy outside of those hours.
That's amazing. And you're trying to develop this thing into something bigger and better.
100%.
And as any good businessman knows, it takes a lot of time to generate something that's really and can give you the returns that you're looking for. I suppose, there are two ways. There are two ways to do it.
But in Cape Town, there are other things you can do after work. You can hike Table Mountain or Lion's Head or go to the beach. So there's so many activities that you're happy with that 9 to 5 that you're living, or in Cape Town 9 to 3.
And no Fridays.
Yeah. That, the rest of the life is nice, where London, it can be quite claustrophobic,
You're at the mercy of the weather. If the weather's kind, you can get out, right? I think if you embrace it and you understand the culture, there's the West End for art, and you can really go out there and have a great time if that's what you're about. Live sports and the live concerts are unbelievable, but although a mission to get to and a mission to get back from.
I suppose traveling in Europe as well is easy. Flights.
Access to different spaces. You can get a bit of sun in Spain all year round, depending. I suppose you've really just got to put yourself out there and be willing to be inconvenienced to go and get that convenience.
And not to get too political, but just in terms, so there was nothing about South Africa with your move to the UK in terms of the country, the government, where are we going as a country?
Yeah, I think I had my reservations. I think for the most part, I was sort of during COVID, made a move during COVID. Everything leading up to COVID was sort of economic negative. It didn't look promising. I just didn't like what I saw in terms of leadership. Again, we go to back to that word leadership. Past presidents really didn't set the country up for success, and would have taken someone really special to come in, get the focus right, and turn the country around. I must say, though, having seen South Africa now a few weeks ago, the change in just the energy of the people, the optimism, the lack of load shedding. It's just transformed the psyche.
It's
people
better.
are so much more positive now. The streets are cleaner for whatever reason.
Were you in Joburg?
I was in Joburg and Cape Town.
Okay.
I'd seen they'd sort of removed some of the homeless tents underneath the...
Yeah, they've done that in Cape Town as well.
Nice
in Greenpoint there. Yeah.
All the signs are looking really sort of green shoots for South Africa, and that's really promising to know, because it's always going to be my home, and it's always nice to know that you can go back to something that's sort of healing and getting, fixing itself. And hopefully in the next 10 years, we see something completely different. We see the changes. I think we are unifying. I think education's a big thing in South Africa. If we can get that right, I see we've ranked sort of last in the world for maths and science. That should be something you look at and go, guys, we need to go up 10 places every year.
That's interesting, because I look back at my education and think it was the best time of my life. And I'm struggling to picture putting my kid through school here over and above what I went through in South Africa.
Okay.
I went to Stellenbosch University, unbelievable.
Sure. Amazing,
in terms of connections and I mean, a lot of my friends are here. I went to Bishop's. I don't know if I told you.
Oh, nice.
And the schooling was just so amazing. The friends, the sports, the whole vibe of it was just incredible.
Absolutely. And I think I'm surprised the UK had got so many sort of medals at the Olympics this year, this year, I think it was.
Yeah.
I mean, kids don't do sport in this place.
Yeah.
It's just the weirdest thing.
Well, there's a lot of
like
club
you finish
sport.
school at 3:15. Who, during a working day, who can collect your kid and then take them to sports elsewhere?
Yeah.
I think they need to adopt that.
Do you have a kid?
I've got 2 boys.
Okay, and they're here?
In the UK.
And how old are they?
14 and 12.
Okay, so what is the process that you're going through at the moment with schooling?
I think, listen, the level of education here is unbelievable. I look at some of the maths my kids are doing. They're going to, they could probably send a rocket to the moon pretty soon. I'll work it out pretty quickly, I think. And it's beyond me at times. But I think the level of education here is fantastic.
Okay.
I think what they battle with is some of the softer stuff, the sports, the arts, which they've always been really, really famous for. I'm just trying to figure out when that happens for them, because kids are coming home at 3:15. They come home, they're bored. They'll do their homework. They've still got an evening ahead. I remember being at school, I'd be on a cricket pitch until 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
I'd have 2-3 practices a week. So you'd probably have a captain's practice on Friday after school. You play your game on Saturday.
100%.
Sunday was your rest day, and you'd go again from Monday through to Saturday.
And we had Motorola flip phones.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's back to that point. Why are the Springboks doing so well against other countries? I can't speak for the other playing nations, but I can tell you, England rugby players come from private schools.
Right.
That's where they get their sort of core group of players from.
Yeah.
Everyone in South Africa plays rugby or has the access to be playing rugby. And we've just then got so much more.
I actually heard that on a podcast the other day, that the rugby in England is from private schools and the guys in the public schools play football.
Yeah, but it's actually the guys from the public schools that you want playing rugby, because those are generally the harder guys. Harder upbringings, a little bit tougher, know how to take a smack, come back the next day with a smile on their face. So I think, again, I don't want to dig too much into it, but I think there's holes in every system. That's the point I'm trying to make is, you can knock South Africa for so much, but you can also knock the UK for so much. And everyone's got work to do, and provided guys are actually doing the work to improve, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, funny, my partner's car got broken into last night. So I was like, oi, we're back home.
Same thing again.
Professionals, though, a little bit different. It wasn't a smash window. Yeah, they took the whole dashboard.
No, did they clean up after themselves?
No. Pretty much. I mean, 7 minutes in, out. They knew what they wanted, the parts. Anyway, I digress. But final question, as we come to the end of we like to put the guest on the spot a little bit. No, it's just we try and motivate and inspire our listeners a little bit. And being an entrepreneur and a CEO in the retail space and a successful one, what would be your message to anyone in our space that is either wanting to become an entrepreneur or chasing the retail space? What's that sort of message you would leave them?
I think turn around and head in the opposite direction would be the first thing. I think if you want to stay the course, you want to do what we do, and I suppose this is entrepreneurship in general. There are high highs and low lows, and you need to know how to deal with both, because dealing with the lows can be some of the very toughest times in your life. And I think that's in those moments is where you learn the most about yourself, right? Stay the course. Don't give up. Be persistent. A lot of what we do is about luck and timing. If you time things perfectly and you've got a product that people want, and you've got the personality to back it up, the drive, the hunger, and the determination to be a success, I almost guarantee you will be a success. But that doesn't happen in year 1, 2, or 3. You've got to be able to accept losses, fix the problem, come back stronger next time. And I think that's it in a nutshell.
I love that. Thank you so much for joining me this evening.
It's an absolute
It was amazing.
pleasure.
I enjoyed that. That was
I love
great.
that too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.